Good morning. Hello. Good morning. Main input mic level. Main input. Hello. 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 Huh. Is that too loud? Am I too loud? Hello? Hi. Hello? Hey, Chris, I'm a little too loud. Can you turn me down? Hi. I think this is good. I think this is probably a good volume. Awesome. The audience agrees. This is great. Thanks, Chris. Here at the museum, we have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse. Legacy, nice. Eileen was the Red Hot Gala People's Choice Award recipient, and that is how she gained her artist residency here at the museum. For those of you who don't know, the Red Hot Gala is an auction that the museum has every late September, early October, where we raise funds for our programming. Hello and welcome to the museum. Hello, hello. Hello, welcome. For those of you just coming in, we do have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse. She's focused on working and making jellyfish and turtles during her residency. For those of you who are able to see some examples up here at the podium, here's an example of one of the jellyfish, and over there is an example of one of the turtles. At the center bench here, you can see Gabe is using a tool known as jacks. Now he's using diamond shears. They're named as such because of the diamond shape at the center of those shears. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I am here as your visual guide for your hot shop experience. What's happening now is Sarah has brought over a punty. We're separating that singular mass into two. Each one of those masses will be a different part for one of Eileen's sculptures. So for those of you studying heat transfer, Gabe just cooled that glass. So he took heat away from the glass. And he did that in order to cool it and in order to make the glass more brittle and stable at the base. Hey, Chris, can we show what Ben is working on? Over here we have Ben sculpting flippers for a turtle. Some of you had questions about color and color application. I know that there's frit involved because of the dots. Glass color comes in 3 forms: color bar, frit, and powder. And which type of glass color you use is determined by what aesthetic you're going for. Over here you can see Sarah's actually gathering frit on that glass. So you see those chunks? So at the center bench, we're making components for a jellyfish. You can see that the glass that Eileen has gotten darker because it's getting colder as it's exposed to the temperature of the air in the room. We want the core to be cold so that when we put the glass that Sarah has on that piece, it doesn't fall off. Now, all the glass on the ground and on the floor needs to stay above 1,000 degrees, otherwise it will crack and break. So even though we want that core to be cold, we still have to constantly put it inside the reheating furnace. See how it's just slightly brighter right now because it's gotten that heat from our reheating furnace? Now what Sarah's doing is she's getting that frit really nice and hot so that it melts into her clear core that she's got. You can see it's really bright, but the color she's got is actually pink. Again, you can see at the base of the pipe those speckles. So as that glass cools down, it comes closer to that pink color. So that glass that Sarah brought over was hot enough that it actually stuck to that cold core. Now we wanted that middle part to be nice and stable, so we let that cool down, and then Sarah brought over that really molten hot glass. And as soon as they came into contact, they actually stuck together. She's cutting off the excess. A jellyfish. It's very similar to this. So Eileen is a metal worker, glass blower combination. So a lot of her sculptures incorporate both metal and glass. On our pedestals here, you can see a couple of examples. Thanks, Chris. So up on this screen here, you can see some past examples of Eileen's work. For those of you who didn't catch it, Eileen was the 2022 People's Choice Award winner for our Red Hot Gala. Eileen is based in Olympia, Washington. So the process here is we're going to make a bunch of parts, and then later on this afternoon, we'll actually assemble the sculptures. Does anyone have any questions for me? The question is, how long does it take to make one sculpture? And that really depends. Here at the Museum of Glass, we have a large team of people, so we're able to make it slightly faster than, let's say, it's just 2 people. But we're able to accomplish 2 pieces in a day. Now remember, Eileen did a lot of prep work for this residency, and she's already done all the metal work. She brought it from Olympia to the museum, so that is also something to consider as well. So Sarah is putting one of our tentacle parts inside the garage. The garage is our way of pressing pause on glass making. The garage keeps the glass warm enough that it doesn't shatter and break, but not so hot that it's molten and moving. So we'll be able to later on today take that part out of that garage and start sculpting it. What Ben just did is he also pressed pause on that part, but he loaded it inside a kiln, and it'll stay there. We'll be able to pick it back up with a glob of clear glass and assemble it into another sculpture. This piece of equipment is called a top loader because you load from the top. Our kilns are typically at about 1,000 degrees because remember, the glass has to stay above that threshold. So now Gabe is making more components. He's gone inside that pink frit. Now he's melting that in. We want that internal part to be cold and sturdy so that when we put that pink frit on, it doesn't move. What Gabe is doing is he's marvering. Marver is the equipment in the center of the hot shop. It's a large steel table. Have any questions? Cool. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Now, the shape that Gabe is marvering that glass into is very important. We want it to be a nice taper, right? So that when Eileen puts the glass on that cold core, it comes off evenly in that ribbon. So he's got to make a nice cone shape. She's using those tweezers in order to create that ribbon. Hey, Chris, can we play the furnace slide, please? So this is our furnace. We're fortunate enough to actually have 2,000-pound furnaces. We've got one on either side of the hot shop. They run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and are powered by natural gas and forced air. The temperature that they're at is about 2,100 degrees. Thanks, Chris. For those of you who haven't been to the museum before, I just want to point out to you that you are able to walk 360 around. Check out our fabulous cone blueprints, and you can also get a different perspective of the glass making process. What Eileen's doing right now is she's creating friction in that tentacle right where it'll eventually be broken off. It's called the jack line. That's where we will eventually be removing that glass from one pipe and putting it onto another. Hey, Chris, can we have eyes on Ben? Here we have Ben making another flipper. On the top side is a green color, on the bottom is a white. Those are both frit. Now you can see when the glass first comes out, it's that really bright orange color. He needs to get it hot enough so that he's able to cut into that fin. And as it's exposed to the air, it becomes its truer color, the green and the white. So what's important is that the fins match. So you saw that Ben has calipers, and he made sure that they were the same length. The question is, how much does a color bar cost? It's absolutely dependent on what color it is. Reds tend to be more expensive because they have gold in it. That's how that creates that color. But they range, expensive side, 113, and it's also in kilograms because they're made in Europe, to as cheap as 63 bucks. You can go through many, many color bars for one sculpture. Glass is not the most financially accessible material. Any questions over here? Can we show that furnace slide again, please? So here's the anatomy of our furnace, right? So we've got this big ceramic pot. That's what is holding the glass itself. And then we have many, many layers of insulation. Things like frax, brick, rammable, all sorts of fun stuff. And then that steel that you're seeing is actually just the outermost layer. Thanks, Chris. The question is, how many glasses break in the furnace? None. None. We do not break glass in the furnace. The furnace is how we melt the glass, so we're only pulling molten glass out. Can we show the gathering slide, please? So think of the glass inside that furnace as honey, and that pipe is the honeycomb, and so we're taking layers of molten glass. So the glass is only ever solid when it's been able to cool down, but we keep our temperature of our furnace at 2100 degrees, so the glass is always viscous or liquid. The question is, how much do we get paid for this? I'm not at liberty to discuss that. The question is, who made the turtle on the pedestal? The pedestal was made by our visiting artist, Eileen Lagasse. Can we go ahead and show the artist slides, please? For those of you who aren't familiar with Eileen's work, here are some examples of previous work. She also has work for sale at the Museum of Glass store. She's a metalworker glassblower based out of Olympia, Washington, and she was the 2022 People's Choice Award winner for our Red Hot auction and gala. This year's auction and gala will happen September 30th, 2023. Thanks, Chris. The question is, why do we have a big cone? We love our cone. It's a highlight of architecture. For those of you who don't know this, Dale Chihuly is actually from Tacoma. So that's why we have the Bridge of Glass, and Dale Chihuly, Delta Hooley, interesting. Dale Chihuly helped with making the studio glass movement possible. He also made a school up in Stanwood, Washington called Pilchuck Glass School. He also had a hand in starting the Hilltop Artist Program based in Tacoma. Question is Dale Chihuly still alive? And yes, he is. He has a place in I think it's West Seattle. So he's still here. He has a fabrication studio in Ballard. And the boathouse. If you've never been to the boathouse, the question is, how does the glass stay on the rod? Some may think that it's because the pipes are tapered. However, it's because steel is a porous material. And so as the steel is exposed to the caustic molten glass, the glass begins to break down that steel, creating a texture. So the glass is able to adhere to the hot metal. Any other questions? Question is, what does this thing do? Technical term, top loader, because we're loading from the top. This is a kiln. It keeps the glass warm so that it doesn't break. All of the glass that we make today has to go through something called the annealing process, and that slowly brings the glass to room temperature. At about 720 degrees, glass is very volatile. It wants to break, it wants to shatter. So the kiln keeps it above that temperature so that it can slowly come down, or it's our way of pressing pause in the hot shop because we're going to pick it back up later. The question is, why isn't the glass on the floor breaking? It's because we're keeping it above that 1,000 degree mark, right? So our reheating furnaces run at about 2,300 degrees. So by continuously reheating that glass and getting it above that 1,000 degree threshold, we're ensuring that the glass doesn't shatter. If the glass makers were to just leave the rod in the air indefinitely, that glass would absolutely shatter. I'm going to get some water. I will be right back. For those of you just joining us, welcome. We have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse here at the Hot Shop. She's making some of her sculptures. Here's an example of one of her jellyfish sculptures, and on the other pedestal you can see an example of a turtle. Right now we're making parts and components to hopefully assemble the sculptures later on this afternoon. Thanks for coming in. So for those of you who are able to see what Gabe is doing, you can see in real time that glass stiffen up and stop moving. So some of you might be asking yourselves, why did he heat up that glass if he was just going to cut it off? He needs to get the glass hot enough that when he uses the shears, it pinches. And then it becomes brittle, and then he's able to cut it. Right now, what Gabe is making are the squiggly tentacles, as you can see here. They're the long, flowy. So the question is, how do the glass makers, when there's so many on the floor, not run into each other with molten glass? Hard to tell. They've all been working together for quite some time. So Ben is our hot shop director. He's been working at the museum since the museum first started. Gabe came shortly after. So Ben's got 21 years. Gabe has 19 years. Sarah, 20, well, at the museum. And then Sarah's got 16 years. So low turnover, right? They've all been working together for quite some time. So here Ben is boxing another fin. So he let the fin cool down, and where it's cinched in, right by the pipe, is where it breaks because it has thermal shock properties. And so when he sends vibrations down the pipe by bonking it, it breaks right at that jack line. It's one of the few times in the hot shop that we actually want the glass to break. For those of you just coming in, welcome to the museum. We have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse here with us at the museum. She was the 2022 People's Choice Award winner for a Red Hot auction and gala. And right now we're making tentacles for one of her jellyfish sculptures. We're also making fins in the far for some of her turtle sculptures. Does anyone have any questions for me? Chris, can we play the artist slides, please? So the question is, how does Eileen form the steel? Eileen uses a mixture of forged blacksmithing techniques and brute force. As most things metal, there's always kind of a brutish vibe when fabricating. She also welds all of these steel utensils together. For those of you who haven't seen Eileen's work before, she does have some for sale at the Museum of Glass store. So these are all traditional blacksmithing forging techniques. Thanks, Chris. So over in real time, you can see as glass becomes cold or heat transfer is happening, the glass is closer and closer to its actual color, which is that darker red, versus that bright orange when it's at its warmer temperature. You can see more heat transfer happening right now with that map gas, that little torch. Gabe needs to heat up that glass in order to cut it. You knew what I was going to ask for right before I asked it, Chris. Good job. So here we have Ben is sculpting another fin. You can see in real time, as the glass becomes colder, it's closer to the actual colors, which is a white underside and then a green top. Ben uses calipers in order to make sure that the fins are the same size. We don't want one flipper ginormous and the other really tiny. We want these to be as realistic as possible. Can we go ahead and play the color slide, please? So for those of you unfamiliar with how the glass gets its color, glass color comes in three forms. Color bar, which is this solid color concentrate, and these shard type situations called frit, and then glass powder. So depending on what you want the glass to look like determines what kind of color you use. Thanks, Chris. For this process, we're using primarily frit. Here you can see Sarah is marvering the frit-filled clear glass. She wants it to have a nice point on it so that when she brings it over to one of the interior components, it evenly comes off the pipe. Anyone have any questions? The question is, how do we get it off the pipe? And you'll be able to actually see that in just a couple of minutes. I think Ben is about to break one off, but it's essentially you let the glass cool enough to where it wants to break. Vibrations are then sent up the pipe and it's knocked off. So Ben will be boxing this fin into this top loader in the next few minutes. So let's check this out. You see how Ben has cut right by where the pipe is? He's made that smaller in order to encourage the glass to break off at the point of least resistance, the point where it's as close to the pipe as possible. Now Ben is cutting in on that jack line, right? He's creating a lot of tension. He's telling the glass, hey, I want you to break right there. So he's introduced fire, which got it hot, and then he introduced a cold tool. So now that glass is pretty upset. Something called thermal shock is happening in that glass. Then vibrations seal the deal. And it's as easy as that. You know, no worries. The question is, essentially, why did Ben put it in this kiln? This kiln is at about 900 degrees, so I believe he will go and pick it back up later when we're ready to assemble the sculptures. Just like this tentacle. Because remember, we can't let that glass get too cold, otherwise it will shatter and break. The annealing process is critical to make sure that the glass can survive living in our temperate room. For those of you just coming in, welcome to the Museum of Glass. We have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse here as a visiting artist residency. She was the 2022 People's Choice Award winner at our Red Hot Auction and Gala. Over here on the pedestals, you can see a couple examples of the work that she's making today. We've got turtle and a jellyfish. At the center bench, Eileen is constructing the tentacles that'll be assembled into a jellyfish sculpture later on this afternoon. And over in the corner, we've got Ben focusing on turtle components. Here we have a rare sighting. We're about to see how the furnace gets refilled here at the museum. This is like a unicorn opportunity. So in these large tubes, we have something called batch. Batch is how glass starts. We import it from a place called Spruce Pine Batch in Spruce Pine, North Carolina. It's an amazing glass. So Nick is suited up. What he's doing now is he's raking. So he's pushing glass from the top. He's like skimming the surface. And then he'll be adding more glass inside that furnace. Our furnaces hold up to 1,000 pounds, and we blow glass 5 days a week. So we've got to refill that pot. So you guys can kind of see out of that furnace door the flames emitting. That's because that's the high fire being turned on in that furnace. So when Nick went in, stirred the pot with his rake, the glass cooled down. So the thermocouple in the furnace has detected that we've lost temperature, so now we've got to maintain that 2100 degrees to make sure that our glass is nice and molten. So once that high fire shuts down, we will most likely be charging the furnace. That's the technical term. Here you can see Sarah's getting more of that frit. So we're using a wide variety of colors here. It's primarily frit-based color applications. We've also got Gabe over in the corner adding more frit to his as well. For those of you just coming in, welcome. You guys hear our high fire shut off? No longer have those flames shooting out. So batch is granular particles of glass. So it's a mixture of different materials such as sand, there's a flux in there, sometimes it's borax, boron. I'm not really sure the technical aspect. But he used a chute and he just shot about 50 pounds of glass into that furnace. And over a period of 3 to 5 days, that glass will fine out, that's the technical term, where all of those granules will break down and be solid, clear glass. We only melt clear glass inside of our furnaces because we use glass for so many different things. Also, our visiting artist residency program, we want to make sure that when we want clear glass, we've got plenty of it. And that's also why we actually have 2 furnaces on the hot shop floor. One over here where Gabe is hanging out, and then the one that Nick is currently refilling. The capacity of that furnace is 1,000 pounds. So now he's stirring the pot. He's making sure the fresh stuff is kind of getting towards the bottom, and then the other stuff's coming up top, so that we're able to fine out the batch faster. Does anyone have any questions for me? Can we play the gathering slide, please? So inside that furnace is essentially glass that feels and resembles honey. And that pipe is working as that honeycomb to gather some glass on there. So depending on the size of the pipe and the size of the glass underneath, because you can have many layers of glass, that determines how large your gather is. Thanks, Chris. The question is, how come the rod doesn't get hot? The rod is at its hottest right after a gather, which is why we've got a couple of things called pipe coolers. It's a foot pedal operated. It cools down the pipe. So the pipe does get hot, but the heat transfer is not enough to be uncomfortable when we're working this small. Can we go ahead and play Eileen's slides, please? So for those of you unfamiliar with Eileen's work, here are some examples. She's based out of Olympia, Washington. She's a blacksmith, welder, fabricator, glassblower combination. So she's brought these cages up from her studio in Olympia to assemble some of her sculptures here at the museum. She was the 2022 People's Choice Award winner for her donation to the Museum of Glass's Red Hot Auction and Gala. And that's what awarded her this residency. Thanks, Chris. The question is about recycling glass. Here at the museum, we recycle what clear glass we're able to. It can be in big chunks, it can be in small chunks. But most of the time when, let's say we want to recycle a large thing, it's going to shatter because it hasn't been through the annealing process. So it inherently makes itself into small chunks. We also don't want it to be super massive because it can explode when we put it in because of the thermal shock. So, I mean, you can throw in as big a chunks as you want, but it might not be the best for your furnace because all that refractory in there is soft. It's a soft material. So what Sarah's doing here is she's loading that tentacle into this top loader. We'll be able to use those pieces later on when we're ready to assemble the sculptures. But for now, we're pressing pause on them. That kiln will hold those pieces of glass at about 1,000 degrees so that we ensure they don't shatter. But that's not so hot that the glass is malleable. The kilns are heated by elements, similar to your oven. It's electrical. Hey, Chris, do we have a kiln slide? Is that a thing? So for those of you who can see Sarah, she just took a gather. Now that glass is clear, but it is so warm. It appears to be orange or yellow or white. And now she's taking that furnace heat from that clear glass, and she's using that to roll in that frit, pick up that colored glass. So right now, Tim has the middle component on the pipe, while Sarah is making what'll eventually be the fins that'll be attached to the glass that Tim has at the center bench. Here you can see as soon as Sarah touches down on that glass, it adheres. And it's hot enough so that Eileen is able to sculpt it. That shape that Sarah brought that glass over is very important. It needs to be a cone so that as Eileen takes the glass off of Sarah's pipe, it's nice and even. We want those fins to be even. Can we go ahead and play Eileen's slides? So for those of you unfamiliar with Eileen's work, she does have some for sale in the Museum of Glass store. She's based out of Olympia, Washington, and she's brought up some of her steel armatures to be assembled here at the museum. In 2022, she was the People's Choice Award winner for her donation to the Museum of Glass Red Hot Auction and Gala. She primarily uses utensils and found objects in order to assemble her sculptures. And they're often animalistic in theme. Thanks, Chris. So this might actually be a great opportunity for me to talk about a program we have here at the Museum of Glass called Kids Design Glass. It's one of our outreach programs. On the way to the bathroom, you can see some of the previous sculptures. Any child under the age of 12 is able to submit drawings of objects that they would like to see in glass. Then a lottery happens and the museum chooses which ones to make. 2 are made. 1 goes to the family and the other goes into the Museum of Glass's Kids Design Glass exhibition, which has traveled the world. Really awesome. So if anyone knows a child, they don't have to be creatively genius at all. So we love to see what kind of creativity kids have. As you can see here, we also have another program called Field Trip Fridays, where students in the Tacoma area are able to come to the Museum of Glass and learn about glass making and the phenomena of glass and heat and fire. While I'm at it, why not? We also have an opportunity for adults to play with glass. We offer classes here at the museum with various themes. Hello, hello, and welcome to the Museum of Glass. Can we go ahead and play Eileen's slides, please? For those of you just coming in, we have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse. She is from Olympia and is a blacksmith, welder, glass artist, sculptor combo platter. Here on the pedestals, you can see a couple examples of the work that she's creating. She also has work available in the Museum of Glass store. On the hot shop floor, we're making sea turtle fins over in the corner with Ben, and we're making various tentacles in various colors over in the center. Thanks, Chris. Tim right now has the inside core of one of the next tentacles. We're making them in a variety of different colors. All of the color that we're using today is called frit. It is glass concentrate that has been broken down. Glass color comes in 3 forms. Color bar, like this. And then we break the bar, and that becomes frit, or large chunks. And then we break the frit, and that's how we get powder. The question is, how much power or energy does our kiln take? I'm relatively certain it's 3-phase. I don't know the specifics. The question is, how is color bar made? There are 3 distributors: Gaffer Glass, Kugler Color, and Reichenbach. It is a bunch of chemical components depending on what color, and at one of those 3 places, they're gathering the color out of a furnace. So here we only melt clear, but at the manufacturers of glass color, they have color pots. So they pull out that gather, and then they make it into that bar form. All based in Germany. The question is, will we be assembling one of the sculptures today? Later on this afternoon, Eileen is planning to assemble one, but today is primarily going to be parts day. She is here through Sunday. A 5-day residency was awarded to her from her donation to the 2022 Red Hot Auction and Gala here at the Museum of Glass. Every year, one residency is awarded, and it's determined by people voting for the piece that they liked the most. Here we can see Ben is making another fin. You can see the top side is white and the other side is a green color. The question is, what is this right here? This is called the garage. The garage is where we park the glass or press pause so that until we're ready to use it. So this garage is running at about 1500 degrees. It's got a hot side, which is here. Inside the garage, there's something called a ribbon burner. It's essentially a pipe with a bunch of little holes. We've got the ribbon burner on here. This is our hot side, and on the other side is our cold side. Now remember, hot and cold is relative here in the hot shop because we don't want any of the glass to go below 1000 degrees. So when I talk about cold core or when I talk about furnace heat, it's always above 1000, tends to be under 2300 degrees. So what we're doing with the garage is we're parking parts that we're not quite ready to assemble. You can see in the camera right now the wide variety of different colors that Eileen is using today. The cores of the tentacles and the fins are all different colors. Primarily, we're using frit. Frit comes in a variety of different sizes. You can have frit 1, frit 2, frit 3, all the way to powder, and it's determined by how large those chunks are. Here you can see Sarah is boxing another tentacle. The term boxing refers to putting it in the box or the kiln or the annealer. Wide variety of words to describe the same thing. That garage and that kiln are doing exactly the same thing. They are keeping the glass warm enough that it doesn't break, but not so warm that it becomes malleable and can pick up any of the texture inside that kiln. Hello, for those of you just coming in, welcome to the Museum of Glass. We have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse here at the Hot Shop. Right now she's working on parts and components for some of her sculptures. Over here you can see an example of a jellyfish, and over there you can see an example of a sea turtle. Ben is making fins over on the far bench for the turtle. The rest of the team are making tentacles. For those of you wondering what all the hullabaloo is about, we're trying to make sure that we've got a left and a right and a front and a back, and when you're making a bunch, you know? If anyone has any questions at any point, don't be afraid to ask. I am here as your visual guide for your Hot Shop experience today. Can we go ahead and show Eileen's slides, please? For those of you unfamiliar with Eileen's work, she is an artist, welder, sculptor, glassblower based out of Olympia, Washington. She uses mixed media in order to form her animalistic sculptures. She was awarded the People's Choice Award in 2022. With that award came this 5-day residency here at the museum. She uses a lot of utensils, found objects in order to sculpt her work. She uses a combination of traditional fabrication techniques and blacksmithing. Thanks, Chris. She also has work for sale at the museum store, so you can see it really up close. Can we show just the first of Eileen's slides with the description? This is the piece. Thanks, Chris. For those of you wondering why I seem to be talking to no one, we actually have an AV person up over yonder. His name is Chris, and he controls all the cameras so that we're able to get the best viewpoint. Behind the scenes at the Museum of Glass. And for those of you who haven't been to the Museum of Glass before, you are able to walk full 360 to get a different perspective of the glassmaking process. We also have lovely blueprints of our cone you're able to view. I can see that there's quite a few young people in the audience, so I'll take this opportunity to talk about the Kids Design Glass program we have here at the museum. Kids under the age of 12 are able to submit drawings for the museum to potentially make. We always make 2 sculptures, one for the family to keep and one to be a part of our Kids Design Glass exhibition. You can submit as many drawings as you want. The question is, essentially, what happens at night with the glass? Because remember, we need to keep that glass a certain temperature so it doesn't shatter and break. So we just boxed another component. That's called a kiln. The kiln allows for us to slowly bring the glass to room temperature. This is called the annealing process. Over a period of 9 hours, starting at 950 degrees, going all the way down to room temperature, that ensures that the glass does not become exposed to too cold of temperatures too quickly, which causes thermal shock, and that's what makes glass brittle and want to break. But once the glass has been annealed properly, it can survive in room temperature. Can we play the furnace slide, please? So our furnace never shuts down. We've got 2 1,000-pound furnaces. They're powered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that is to ensure that we have ample clear glass available for all of our programming. It would take, for instance, a power outage right now shuts down. It would take 6 days for that furnace to cool down. It would also destroy all of our refractory, that thermal shock. So our ceramic pot, break, yada yada. So we don't turn it off. For those of you just coming in, welcome. We have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse here at the Hot Shop floor. We have 2 of her sculptures on display here, a turtle and a jellyfish. We're making some jellyfish components in the center here. I do believe Ben just finished making all of our fins, so we'll be changing lanes. TBD, not really sure what we'll make next. So on the hot shop floor, we have 2 furnaces. One is charging. So one, we are putting batch inside. We do not want to gather out of that furnace because it would be seedy. Some of those granules haven't had the opportunity to fully melt down, so we'd get weird lumps in it, essentially, which is material that hasn't quite fined out is the technical term. So we're only pulling clear glass from this furnace over here. As far as the glory holes or reheating furnaces, it's up to them, you know, where they work. I know that over here we're primarily working on tentacles, and over there we were making fins, and that determined where you went. So Eileen is deaf. She's a deaf artist. So if you see her signing, that's what's going on. It's also, we're working on our accessibility here at the museum, so our closed captions. So the museum has gone through many changes since the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we had two different residency opportunities. We had the Monday-Tuesday residency, where a local artist comes and it brings their own team and is able to make their work, giving the Museum of Glass Hot Shop team a break. That was their weekend. Now we don't have that program quite up and running again, so there's only the team awarded residencies. So the Museum of Glass team is here to help facilitate your work. You are able to bring as many helpers as you want, but with all of the experience here at the museum, they're a great resource. In 2022, we had 60 applications for a residency. Only 8 were awarded, so it's very competitive. You do not need to be a glass artist in order to apply. I highly encourage anyone with any creative outlet to apply, and the Museum of Glass team will make your dreams a reality to the best of their ability. The question is, how come there aren't any fumes? We have a magnificent HVAC system where all of our fumes are right on out of here. Over here on our corner, in our corner area, Ben and Eileen are beginning to sculpt the heads for the turtle. For those of you who haven't had an opportunity to see some of Eileen's work, we've got a jellyfish over here and a turtle over on the other pedestal. She also has some work available in the Museum of Glass store, so you can see it up close and personal. 900 degrees. So we need to keep that glass at least that temperature so that it doesn't shatter. We're not quite there yet. So at the very end of the day, we'll send all the glass down to room temperature. This is the annealing process. But for now, we're just pressing pause. We're parking that glass inside that kiln so that later on this afternoon, we can pick it back up and assemble one of Eileen's sculptures. I can't speak to how far we'll get because we're primarily focusing on making parts and components today. I believe that there are parts for 2 turtles because there's like 9 flippers. We've got 2 teams. 2 teams. We've got Team Turtle and Team Jellyfish. They're actually sculpting the turtle head right now. We're making tentacles for the jellyfish here. Those are the tentacles, yep. If you watch closely, you'll slowly see a turtle head emerge out of this wad of glass. Now, this is a very, very important tool she's using. Some of you might be confused because it looks like a butter knife, but this is a sculpting tool. So what Ben is doing right now is he's using the hot torch in order to spot heat areas that'll eventually form the eyes of the turtle. You can see Eileen has a stamp in her hand that'll form the outline, that'll make an impression of that stamp onto that glass. You can see in real time as that glass cools down, it becomes closer to the actual color it is, which is a combination of white and green. Hi, welcome to the museum. The question is, does the residency include all the materials? No. The residency includes up to 2,000 pounds of clear glass, but as far as color, it doesn't supply that. In 2018, I had a residency here at the museum. It was my first experience with the Museum of Glass. I'm from, well, I live in Seattle, so I had the Monday, Tuesday, back when that was still a residency. It, in color, was about $7,500. Yeah. Right now you can see Eileen's got something called a stringer. It's like a string of glass. We're very clever with what we call things. So she's using that stringer in order to put a concentrated amount of black glass on that turtle head, which will eventually form the eye. Hi, welcome to the museum. So if you watch closely, Eileen does this swirly at the end, and that's to break off that last bit of glass, so we have a clean break. Swirly bit, boop. Can we go ahead and play Eileen's slides, please? For those of you unfamiliar with Eileen's work, she is a blacksmith artist, sculptor, glass blower, who creates animalistic sculptures. She primarily uses found objects such as forks, spoons, knives in order to forge and fabricate her cages. And then glass is added as a secondary element. Thanks, Chris. She also has some work available in the Museum of Glass store. So if you want to see the sculptures really close and in person, I highly suggest stopping in there. Right now we're working on 2 varieties of sculpture. A sea turtle, like you can see on this pedestal here, and jellyfish. So we've got tentacles happening in the center stage here, and then we've got the sea turtle head that is being sculpted in the corner. Earlier today we made all the fins for 2 sculptures. So now we're going to go ahead and make the heads. So over here, Sarah is preparing to box that tentacle that she just sculpted. So inside that kiln, that glass will stay until we're ready to use it. So we needed 8 fins. We made 9 because we lost track of left and right and front and back. A few extra is good planning. I think that there are definitely a few extra of everything. Yeah. Especially the tentacles. I feel like there's going to be extras of those. So this jellyfish only has one central tentacle. The ones that she's sculpting later on will have 3, which is why we're making so many. The question is, who owns the work that is created during the residency? You do, as the artist. So Eileen will own all of this work. We do ask that the visiting artist contribute 1 piece to our permanent collection and 1 piece to Red Hot. So the same gala that awarded Eileen this residency, we ask that you donate to that as well. So here you can see Sarah is gathering more frit. All of the color for Eileen's sculptures that we've seen today are primarily using frit as their color application. Frit are shards of glass color concentrate. So she's able to get that speckly, textury look to her sculptures. For those of you just coming in, welcome to the Museum of Glass. Here we have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse during her artist residency here at the museum. Can we go ahead and play Eileen's slides, please? For those of you unfamiliar with Eileen's work, she is a welder, fabricator, blacksmith, sculptor, glassmaker, combo platter, and she uses found objects. She has a theme of recycling, so she is saving objects from the landfill and incorporating them into her sculpture. She also has pieces available for sale at the Museum of Glass store, so be sure to check those out. You can see them up close and personal. Today we are working on components for 2 turtles and a jellyfish. She is planning on assembling one of her jellyfish sculptures after lunch today. Thanks, Chris. Hello and welcome to the museum. Over here we have visiting artist Eileen Lagasse and Ben working on this 2 of 2 for our sea turtle heads. In the center, we're making more tentacles for our jellyfish. You can see examples of Eileen's work on the pedestals. Here's one of her sea turtles, and then we have a jellyfish over there. On this center table here, this is called a marver. We've got a variety of different colors for what that we're using in the form of frit to create these sculptures. Something's burning. Yeah, I don't know. Is that you? What, the rubber? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for me? The question is, are we going to be doing glass blowing? This afternoon, we will be blowing into one of Eileen's jellyfish sculpture armatures. However, this part of the day, we're just sculpting solid glass. So we're making, earlier today, we made the fins. I do believe they just finished the second head, and then we're also making tentacles for the jellyfish. So here we have a rare unicorn sighting. We are refilling our furnace. This is called charging the furnace. Inside those chutes are the raw material for glass. We import this material from a place called Spruce Pine Batch. Over the next few days, the glass will fine out and all melt together in one big cohesive blob, essentially. Meanwhile, we have another furnace that we're pulling our clear glass from because that glass that we're loading in right now needs to fine out. If we were to go take a pipe and take another gather right now, we would get lumps. Not a good look. We want crystal clear glass, so that's why we're pulling out of our other furnace. Look at that unicorn. Wow. Can we go ahead and play Eileen's slides, please? So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Eileen's work, she hails from Olympia, and she creates metal sculptures using found recycled materials. So she's rescuing these utensils from the landfill and creating sculptures out of them. This glass blowing technique is called cage making. We will eventually be blowing glass inside of these cages that she's sculpted at her home in Olympia. She also has work for sale in the Museum of Glass store, so feel free to stop by and check that out. You can get really nice and close. We've got an example of one of her jellyfish on this pedestal right over here. We have another example of one of the sea turtles over here. In our far bench, we've got Ben and Eileen sculpting another sea turtle head, and I do believe we finished the tentacles. Thanks, Chris. Do let me know if you have any questions at all. We're kind of ramping down as we'll be taking lunch after this head. So that is frit. That is concentrated glass color. Glass color comes in three forms: color bar, frit, which is color bar that's been broken into shards, and then powder. So that's frit that's been pummeled essentially into glass powder. So that frit will put a colorful texture and kind of like spots to simulate the turtle. Are they scales? I think, do turtles have scales? It's like it's an interesting texture. I don't know if it's a scale or I don't know, but it's the turtle texture. So you can see in real time as Ben is marvering that glass, it's cooling down and coming closer to its actual color, which is a white and a green, as you see in those stainless steel bowls. So now Eileen is going to be adding the eyeballs or the pupils to the turtle head. You can see that she's got a hot torch, and she's got what's known as a stringer, which is a string of colored glass. We're very fancy with our words here in America as far as naming glass blowing tools and techniques. Does anyone have any questions for me? Question is, why did you choose glass? And I think Gabe is a perfect candidate to answer this question. Why are you a glassmaker? Glass chose Gabe. I think to some extent you are a little crazy. And you also love fire. I think everyone in this room is probably part pyromaniac. It's also really exciting and really exhilarating. And I'll speak to everyone here that you relate to the process making in some way, like some fundamental, sentimental way. With the yellow?
I was living in a school bus in the 90s.
So into the annealer, this glass will go. And over a period of 9 hours, it'll slowly come down to room temperature. This is called the annealing process. This makes sure that the glass doesn't ever become exposed to thermal shock or getting too hot too quickly, too cold too quickly. So over those 9 hours, it will anneal. That is the last of the glass making that we're making before lunch. We will take a 1 hour break now-ish. And then when we come back, we will be assembling one of Eileen's jellyfish sculptures. So if you're still around, that should be pretty exciting. Does anyone have any last minute questions for me? Okay.